Well, thank you so much for joining us on Parliament Television today, the third day in the month of June 2025. To be on live commentary, my name is Paulson Tindovi. My sign language interpreter is Jason Manda. Today, we continue with the Committee on Agriculture, Lands and Natural Resources. Yesterday, they were interacting with the Ministry of Justice. And they continue looking at the agreement on the fisheries subsidies under the World Trade Organization. So today we do have three witnesses. We have PELAM Zambia, CARITAS Zambia, and we expect to conclude the day with a Jesuit for theological reflection. So the witnesses are already in the committee room, and this is PELAM Zambia. We cross over to the committee.
Fishing vessels or fish fleets to the open sea. This World Trade Organization agreement we are reviewing today, Chair, is an agreement to subsidies that are specific within the meaning of Article 2 of the agreement to marine wild capture fishing and fishing related activities at sea. The agreement goes further, Chair, to indicate that aquaculture and inland fishing are excluded from the scope of this agreement. I should say that as Zambia, we are trying to promote aquaculture and promote fishing with water bodies that are inland and not at sea. The World Trade Organization agreement of subsidies is a big step, Chair, towards ocean sustainability by prohibiting harmful fishery subsidies which have contributed to the depletion of fish stocks at the sea. Research has shown that the major contributors to these are mostly Asian and Western countries that have provided huge amounts of subsidies to fishing vessels that have gone into open seas to do the fishing. And these large vessels have significantly undermined some of the low development countries that have small-scale fishers that go to fish in these waters. And so the agreement is in a way meant to protect these small-scale fishers who are not able to get large capital to do large-scale fishing. The agreement, Chair, may, if it comes into force, may restrict some subsidies that a country may need. For instance, on our sector is young and it's growing. And I think there is need for government and other partners to incentivize the small-scale farmers for them to actually produce more. For instance, provide loans for them to buy fishing vessels, buy fishing nets, buy cooling systems that they may need as fishermen. And so having this agreement may in a way provide that restriction for subsidies to be given to these small-scale fishers that actually need help at the moment. The agreement is also not very specific, Chair, on the implementation details, such as defining illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, which subsidies are prohibited. It is not very clear how this is done. There is therefore need for instance to have clear definitions of this. There is also an issue of enforcement, Chair, when it comes to the enforcing this treaty. Enforcement mechanisms that prohibit subsidies are not well defined and they may cause a challenge. This requires high level of investment in data management, human resource and monitoring, which as a country like Zambia we have challenges at the moment of enforcement, even within the sector of not having enough manpower, not having resources that can actually provide equipment for these monitorings to be done. Having said that, Chair, we feel at this moment, and having reviewed the agreement as PELAM and with our partners, it is our view that the agreement, having reviewed the agreement, it is our submission that Zambia should not ratify the agreement at the moment. Like I mentioned earlier on, this agreement specifically talks about the seas, and it does not talk about inland bodies, which as Zambia we don't have access to the seas. But we do, however, recognize and appreciate the fact that the treaty is in a way encouraging trade, and as Zambia we do appreciate the trade that comes with other countries. That would also help us in terms of enhancing our trade with other countries. But we feel we have yet to develop a sector that will effectively contribute to international trade and make us a better trading partner with other countries. We need to develop this sector at the moment, and ultimately this may require subsidies to be given to small-scale farmers, or small-scale fishers who may need support for them to improve their capacity to fish, and also the capacity for us to improve our stock in the rivers and lakes that we have that have depleted, and this may require time for us to establish that position. The main reason, like I said, of this agreement is for countries with oceans and seafronts. Secondly, this agreement does not stop Zambia from trading with other countries on fish, which thus we can still trade with different countries using different agreements that are in place. We recommend the following: that Zambia should assess and provide necessary resources to its fishing industry to ensure that it develops levels of meeting the national fish requirements and get the capacity to export. Secondly, Zambia should continue to monitor developments of the implementation of the agreement to ensure that it does not impact the local industry. To conclude, Chair, I want to say that Zambia has shown great commitment to being part of the global community and supporting efforts of global integration and development to benefit communities and the environment. We acknowledge the importance of the WTO Fisheries Subsidies Agreement and its objectives. However, committing to global agreements should not disadvantage a member state, but ensure that a member fully benefits from the agreement, and the agreement speaks to the core needs and gaps of the member state. We should in this regard ensure that our frameworks, policies and legislation, including implementation, are well established for sustainability and protection of the local industry, including the communities and beneficiaries of these resources. Our current regulations in the fish sector still need strengthening in as far as illegal and unregulated fishing is concerned, where commercial fishing is concerned, protection and management of fishing bodies, investment and awareness of these regulations to the public to enhance participation and accountability is concerned. Strengthening our local fish industry will make us better partners. Chair, we wish to thank the committee for allowing us to make this submission. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have elaborated very, very clearly the stand, but I wanted to be very, very clear. Did you indicate that Zambia should not ratify this agreement? If I got you clear.
Yes, Chair, I did.
Thank you very much. Before we proceed, I'll ask our colleagues that have joined us to introduce themselves.
Chair, thank you so much. And
good morning, Chair.
Honorable Mtacharo, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Honorable Yota Mtacharo, Member of Parliament for Chairman of.
Thank you.
I'm Honorable Mtacharo, Member for Chairman of. I'm a member of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good morning, our witness. My name is Peter P., Member of Parliament from Kaika constituency. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, witness. I'm Banda Kreo, Member of Parliament for Vubwi and a member of this committee.
Thank you, colleagues. Honorable members, questions. Honorable Simbao.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I was equally I want a clarification. I was following you very keenly, but I'm a bit confused, like the Chair said. You clearly said Zambia will not be affected because we are inland. This is mainly affecting the oceans. And these subsidies, they make those who go to the ocean sell their fish cheaply to countries like Zambia because they are subsidized. So our fishermen here cannot compete in terms of prices. So it is disadvantaging, in my own understanding, it is disadvantaging the Zambians because people would rather buy cheaper fish than buy fish from the Zambians. How then do you say you wouldn't want these subsidies to be removed so that they compete equally with our Zambian fishermen? Thank you.
Honorable Mulambo.
Chair, thank you very much. I want your comment on this part. According to the information that I got, is that though Zambia is a landlocked country, would definitely have significant benefits based on the fact that through the same agreement it is going to support policies to reduce overfishing and of capacity in fresh water bodies, ecosystem. It will definitely encourage the use of better fishing practice and assist in preserving fish stocks and biodiversity for future generation. Yes, we all agree to say that Zambia, it is a landlocked country, but it has fresh water bodies like Lake Tanganyika, Lake Kariba and the Zambezi River, which are in the peripherals of our borders. So I want to hear your comment specifically to justify your assertion that if we were to ratify, it is going to disadvantage, whilst on the other side there is an indication that it's going to benefit based on what I've outlined here. Thank you.
Honorable Mr. Onyima will take 3 questions. Yeah, Honorable Tayengo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Onyima, I loved the way you presented this document, and you've stated that instead of us ratifying, we should concentrate our efforts in building the legislation and also building the local industry. I totally agree with you, because if you look at the Fisheries Act of 2011, this is basically under the Wildlife Act. Yet years have passed and we have not come up with legislation that will support the aqua fishing, the aqua industry. We don't have the legislation that speaks to that. So instead of us signing these treaties, what is your view on the issue of coming up with legislation that will support the aqua fishing industry so that we can build our local industry?
You can proceed to answer those questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for those questions. Yes, there seems to be a conflict of the benefits that comes out of this agreement, but the main contention on our part is that this agreement is trying to curb the use of subsidies in the sector. We have seen, for instance, the Western world in 2018 spent over $15.9 billion to support large vessel fishing companies in the seas. So what that meant is governments either gave financial payments or tax exemptions or loans to these big vessel fishers to go into the open seas and do the fishing, and that developed their fisheries sector. So what it means, if we ratify as Zambia, it basically means we are agreeing to the fact that some of these subsidies should not be given by government to the fishing sector. And our contention is that we have an industry that is growing, which ultimately may need support from government to grow. We may need to give loans, for instance, to fishers to buy equipment or buy fishing nets or boats for them to develop the sector, or encourage facilities for the sector to grow. But under this agreement, and like I said, it is not very clear on what these subsidies are. It is still open. It is not clear what these subsidies that should be blocked are, and we cannot go into some that is not clear, that the subsidies that are at the moment will not affect us. It would also link to the legislation that we want for aquaculture. We are currently, I think in terms of production of fish, I think we are below 100,000 tons, metric tons a year, and we are hoping to double this by 2018. So we need a lot of investment in the sector for the aquaculture to grow. We need legislation that will support this sector. So ratification of this agreement basically will curb us from actually looking at what are the potential subsidies that will help us grow this sector. So our contention is that we shouldn't hurry up to ratify this, but first of all reflect on what the sector needs, what investment is required, and what type of subsidies are required for the sector to grow. That way we can then have a clear picture of how that can conflict with the WTO agreement. As I've been chair.
Country Director, I wanted to find out. I think you are making a case, and a very good case, for not ratification. No, Zambia should not ratify. I come from where the aquaculture is being promoted, and a lot of rigs were bought for the locals, and they were given subsidies, and it was from a donor. I think the government got a loan from from African Development Bank. So that has come to an end, and almost all the local farmers, they are folding up. They are not managing because of the high prices of feed. Is this what you are trying to indicate, that signing that agreement would disadvantage our local farmers, fish farmers? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for that. And I think you've actually brought out a good example. Like you've mentioned, some of these farmers, small-scale fishers, were supported by donor funds. And like you said, once these donor projects end, then the small fishers remain with nothing. But I think it's the responsibility of the government to provide incentives that would help these fishers continue doing their activities. Most of them do not have alternative livelihoods, and they fully depend on the fishing that they do. And therefore we need to either provide mechanisms that will provide financial assistance, for instance a small interest rates to these small fishers to continue with those practices, acquire equipment that they need, build their capacity to make them better fishers so that this sector can grow. But this agreement, we feel, would have an impact on such initiatives or innovations that may be required in future to grow the sector. So we need to introspect as a country, actually review what the sector fully needs. Is the registration in place? Do we have the enforcement that is required to make sure that the sector is not abused by the fishers themselves? And what type of investment is coming to support the sector? Once we do that, I think we develop a sector that will be able to compete at international level with other countries that are also into fisheries. So it is important for us to see that the local sector is actually well established. There is good legislation to support the industry. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Malambo.
Just another question of clarity. I want to find out from you, if neighboring countries like Tanzania, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and which other country, if they were to ratify this agreement, what impact will it have on Zambia, which you are proposing not to ratify? Thank you.
So I think the impact really would not be significant. Like I said, we already have some other trade agreements that we have with other countries that we can use to do trading. But I'm not sure of how developed these countries' fishery sector is, that they could actually take advantage of our underdeveloped sector. But ultimately, I think the impact may not be significant, because these subsidies really are just meant to develop a country sector. Of course, there's some trade agreement which may impact in terms of a country, but that trade also depends on how well you are established, because you cannot trade fish if you are not producing enough to export. So our neighboring countries may have a big fisheries sector, and I think we've been trading with them even before this agreement was proposed. So we have other trade agreements in terms of export of food between our neighboring countries that we can still fall on if we want to trade in fish.
On this agreement, on Article 4.1, it says that no member shall grant or maintain subsidies for fishing or fishing related activities regarding an overfished stock. I thought that if the subsidies are made available, this is going to help us try to replenish the overfished stock, which I believe is finishing because of the bad existing fishing methods. What is your comment on this part?
Thank you, Honorable. I totally agree with that article. No member shall grant or maintain subsidies for fishing or fishing-related activities regarding an overfished stock. So for Zambia, for instance, we have, I think current legislation also looks at protecting the species that we have, that they are not overstocked and they are depleted. And there is some mechanisms in the Act legislation that requires us to protect overstocked species and see how this can be multiplied. And I do agree with this, that this is an article that is essential. But I'll still go back to the subsidies, because if we have a species that is overfished and it's almost depleted, we need to protect that fish. So it requires us to come up with measures that will, for instance, help us restock that fish. You either put a fish ban, or you invest in research, so that your research or development that you have, this stock is protected and it's multiplied until the levels of it are risen to a certain level where people can already again start fishing. But with subsidies, we don't know whether we'll be able to have the opportunity to actually, for government to put in money into that that research, or how much will be acceptable as intervention by government in terms of subsidies. So it's really about the interventions or subsidies that will be allowed. Like I said, the treaty does not specify the allowed and disallowed subsidies. It just says subsidies. So if we have stock that is depleting, then we need to know that for government to protect this species, maybe they might need to incentivize people, deliberately say, okay, we are going to give money to people who just go into breeding this stock so that the stock increases. But we are not sure if that will be allowed or not allowed, because the agreement is not specific on what subsidies will be allowed or not allowed. So the bottom line really is the subsidies are not clear in the agreement. And like you said, we have stock that is depleting that we need to invest in for us to make sure that that species is protected. It may not only be government to do the multiplication. Maybe you might need individuals to just go into fish breeding to make sure that a certain species is protected and it multiplies.
I don't know what would be your comment to the proponents who are saying the agreement prohibits subsidies for illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. So under normal circumstances, subsidies are allowed.
Yes.
Only unless they are illegal. Yes. They are unreported. They are saying this is more why shouldn't we rectify? Because basically even Zambia doesn't want unregulated. Zambia does not want illegal fishing.
Absolutely.
What would be your comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. So,
let me just add Honorable Muzingiri's question. There are some incentives that goes with this agreement. Currently, what is happening in the country is that we are unable to monitor, we are unable to research because of lack of resources. Now, through this agreement, there will be some investment that is related to the same activity. Don't you think taking advantage of the resource envelope that is yet to come, using taking advantage of this subsidy, don't you think that this is going to help our country monitor and research and ensure that we do the right thing to protect the depleting fish? Thank you.
yes, thank you so much for those questions. Yes, yeah, on the technical aspect and capacity, I totally agree. And I think our current legislation actually also recognizes those facts of the need for technical support, the need for monitoring, the need to actually even register people that are going to be fishing in these waters. Their vessels should be registered so that the government has a record or a database of who is fishing and what they are doing. So our current regulation has all those details. What it means, for instance, if we ratify this this agreement, we have to review our current legislation so that it is in tandem with the World Trade Organization, because some provisions may not be currently in our current legislation. So we have to have legislation that will also speak to the World Trade Organization agreement, so that certain components that do not exist are actually put in there. The technical aspect is definitely something that is very important for the sector. But I think we've seen, especially with current events, where I'll give an example of the climate change sector, where we have requested for huge amounts to support our technical capacity to mitigate climate impact. And the main budget are the Western world, who are currently diverting resources for their, for instance, security. And this has impacted on the amounts of monies that we are receiving for technical support on a number of things. And relying on technical support from the outside world is becoming a challenge for us as countries. And we need to build the local capacity to be able to mobilize resources in country, so that we are able to build that capacity within the country. The livestock sector currently is a very low funded sector in terms of the national budget. We see that they don't get as much resources, but we need to have a country that will be able to support at least to a 50 or certain percentage where you have local, because that ensures sustainability. Depending on donor funding, we've seen that it's not sustainable. These funds can easily be stopped at any time, and that affects our implementation of our programs as a country. We have currently the CARITAS, which has set huge targets for us to improve the agriculture sector, and we should be able to mobilize local resources for us to be able to be sustainable in our work. So we appreciate that there is some components of technical support in the agreement, but we should also be wary of how much support we can get from this pool. This is a global pool that every country will want to access. But currently, the focus of this treaty is actually on the seas, because that's where the huge depletion of stock has happened. And that's why this agreement was established, because it was looking at the seas. Because we see countries like China who have vessels that will go into the sea and spend 6 months just fishing, getting stock, and then take inland for sale. So that's where the huge impact has been in terms of overfishing. But we definitely need the technical support, but we shouldn't put it as our only option. I think priority should be given to our ability to mobilize resources locally. I submit.
Thank you so much for your submission. I think it is quite elaborate, enlightening, because as members of parliament, at the end of the day, we have to come up with a decision. So your submission definitely will help us to interrogate this agreement even before we make a final decision. We thank you so much for coming. And your last word. Yes,
thank you, Chair, for this opportunity. Before I go, I wanted to give another example on treaties that we sign even with our neighbors. In 2003 to 25, I used to sit on the water board, and there was a proposal from SADC that wanted countries that use the Zambezi water basin to actually go into an agreement that would make member states to actually get the approval of other countries if they want to do a major project along the Zambezi basin. And I remember having that conversation in the water board where we said this is not a welcome proposal, because at Zambia then we had a very undeveloped water sector. We don't have dams for irrigation. We still relied on one hydropower major. So we said these agreements may not benefit us as a country because that sector is not fully developed. And it's a similar thing with the fishery sector. It is not very developed, and we cannot start competing with other countries. We need first to develop the sector in country. We need to meet the national requirements that we've set as a target in the CACIP before we can actually look at exports. So that would require time, and then we can probably revisit the agreement to see how beneficial it will be to us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much for your submission. I think we appreciate. And as we come to a close, we would like to withdraw the immunity so that whatever you say outside or after this, you'll be on your own. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, members.
Well, thank you so much for still being with us on Parliament Television. Those were our first witness on the committee, and this is the Committee on Agriculture, Lands and Natural Resources. They were interacting with Palem Zambia, and they are looking at the agreement on the fisheries subsidies under the World Trade Organization. We still have 2 more witnesses to appear before this committee. The next witness is CARITAS Zambia, which will be followed by the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection. Still together, keep watching Parliament Television. Once the committee is ready to start receiving submission from the next witness, we'll be able to cross back to that committee. Keep watching Parliament Television.
Moments in our lives that live forever. Moments like witnessing the thunderous call of a natural wonder, or experiencing the roar of the wilderness as its residents come to life, and the lively slither of a river continually